Ukraine and 10 years worth of funding? Have they already capitulated this thing is going to last that long? Put some flesh on the bones of this for me, would you, Daniel?
Okay, look, there's, in my view, NATO is taking a massive gamble with this weird deal going on right now where Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General, flew to Kiev, had this big press conference with Volodymyr Zelensky, and just emphatically, and I mean over and over, said Ukraine will be in NATO. It is their rightful place. They deserve to be in NATO, and it will happen. And we're going to not have this ad hoc, temporary funding deal like we've had up to this point. Now we're going to have a predictable long-term deal, 10 years in the making. And NATO has now put every credibility we have on the line. And if they don't make good on this, if they don't somehow turn this into a victory for Ukraine and a defeat for Russia, then they have just cut the knees out from themselves. You've heard the phrase, you shot yourself in the foot. This is, you've chopped your knees off, because the likelihood, the strong likelihood, is that Russia is going to eventually end up winning this war. And then we have set ourselves up for this big failure. Now, I just cannot imagine why we would take the risk. What's worth it?
Well, my understanding is if they're a NATO country, they're a NATO member, then they are also get a NATO defense obligation, which requires all the other NATO countries to pony up and get into a ground war, a fighting war, a shooting war with Russia.
Well, and see, and that's the point. That's why this is really kind of head scratching to outright bizarre, because the NATO summit, I believe it's like the 70th or 75th, I can't remember which anniversary it's going to be this summer in Washington, and so it's going to be a big hubbub. But the NATO people, have, to include Stoltenberg, has already said they won't be invited at this one. It's going to come someday in the future, but they're not saying when. But they want this funding to be going through now. But here's the problem. You look at the reality on the battlefield, and as we've talked many times, you look at the fundamentals of the go into building combat power at the national level and at the operational level, and that pendulum has swung way over to the Russian side, and it's irrevocable. I mean, the changes that are necessary in the West and that have already taken place in Russia are not equal, and they're continuing to build on the Russian advantage side. So I just don't understand why you want to tie yourself to something that only a miracle basically could reverse at this point, but that seems to be where we are today.
I saw the fog of war and the number of casualties and injured and wounded are impossible to discern. But I did see a report the other day. I think it was in The Sun. Whether or not that's credible or not remains to be seen. But they gave credit to the United Kingdom for the number crunching. They claim somewhere on the order of 450,000 Russians have either been killed or wounded in this conflict. No reference that I saw to the number of Ukrainian soldiers or people killed, but I keep thinking of the size of Russia, and I don't know what the population is relative to Ukraine, but this has been going on long enough. It's been such a bloody conflict with really, and maybe you can correct me on this, no clear victories so far for either side. It kind of back and forth. One gets pushed out, the other one comes in, they fight some more, gets pushed out. So there doesn't seem to be any progress made on either side. But I guess I really have to boil this down to how long can Ukraine continue to fight a war without the assistance of other countries and more boots on the ground?
Yeah, you kind of hit the major issue there at the last part. Is it's the number of personnel that's available. It all comes down to men, not machines, not money. You can print as many dollars as you want and send America further into debt, and I guess the other NATO countries can do the same. They can build a lot of machines, but what they can't build is human beings. They can't build trained soldiers and capable soldiers. And look, I think those numbers are not true. They're not backed up by just a common sense analysis of how the firepower imbalance has existed almost from the beginning of this. I don't understand how you can claim a 10-to-1 disadvantage in firepower on the one hand, and then claim that Russia has like a 5-to-1 increase in the number of casualties than on the other side. It's just physics don't work for that, and I don't think it's true. And you can see that because Ukraine had somewhere around 750,000 to 1 million troops by the summer of 2022. Now then they're trying to recruit an additional 500,000. That tells you something about the scale of the losses that they've had so far. So whatever they're admitting, this ridiculous number of 31,000 killed that Zelensky said a couple of months ago is just nonsensical. It's much, much higher than that, especially the wounded. Now that you're seeing that Ukraine is trying to mobilize this 500,000, they want to get 50,000 per month, but they're getting a fraction of that by forced mobilization. And the people that they're getting don't want to fight. They're literally fighting with the people trying to recruit them. You see videos every day of people grabbing them off the streets. I saw one yesterday. They stopped a van at a parking lot and grabbed the guy out and took him away while his family was screaming in the background. That happens every day. And so I don't know how you just keep going with this, that all this money we just gave is going to be very useful. I mean, it's desperately needed, but it's not going to change the manpower issue on the front line.
Right. And one of the other developments that I don't have any problem with Ukraine wanting to defend itself, and to the extent it can, fine. They were invaded by a foreign power. I get that. But this development of now using longer range missiles that they got from us or our NATO friends and shooting farther and farther into Russia, um, that suggests to me that Vladimir Putin may just say, you know what? I've been holding back. I've been keeping my powder dry, but this is beyond the pale. I'm going to start unleashing some real armaments on you, and maybe some ICBMs, or I don't think he would entertain nukes, but they do have a tremendous array of firepower that I haven't yet seen unleashed there. Or am I wrong with that conclusion?
No, you're right, but more than one direction. First of all, the claim that now they're going to get long range weapons, the Ukraine side, is not accurate. They've had long range weapons. They've had the British Storm Shadow missile and reports of some Taurus missiles out of Germany. That's not official, but reports are that that's been the case anyway, despite what the German government said. But the bottom line is they have had long range missiles, so this is going to add to it. There's a second problem, though, was in Defense One on Monday, that we've actually admitted that Russia's electronic warfare has been terribly successful in knocking down a lot of our high-tech GPS-guided bombs, which, of course, HIMARS and AgTACMs have basically the same guidance system, and several of our other categories of bombs are almost so useless now. Ukraine doesn't even use them because they almost never hit the target because of electronic warfare. So it's not going to be a panacea. It's not going to be this great success. Some get through like anything does, and they can make Russia mad. They can hit them hard, but it's not going to change anything on the front line at all. And you don't need any more proof than that, than to see that Russia has been firing long-range missiles from the outset all throughout the entire Ukraine country. And it has not brought them to their knees by itself. And so a handful of missiles on the other side, it's absurd to suggest that that's going to make a difference. It's just not going to.
Where's the international outcry over the civilian casualties that are getting hit by these larger missiles that are fired by Ukraine?
There's none. There's none. I mean, they've been attacking into Belgorod, this civilian city in Russia on the northern side. They've been hitting Donetsk city almost from the outset. It's not even a military town. It's just a civilian town. And everybody doesn't in the West just doesn't even pay attention to it. They don't care. They only care when it's the other way around. And of course, Russia has committed war crimes. And, there's no question a lot of those are legit. But the problem is that, the Russians see it. And when they see their civilian cities getting hit, I assure you that has an impact on them.
Certainly. Well, pivoting back to something rather alarming, you're letting us know about this electronic technology and their ability to defeat our more sophisticated weapons like HIMARS. Are we learning anything from that during this conflict? I mean, will this $60 billion most recent infusion go to upgrade America's equipment, and then us giving Ukraine's maybe some of our older stuff that we find out maybe isn't effective anymore?
Well, that, according to what the Secretary of Defense has said, that's exactly what's happening. That the majority of this 61 billion, everybody tosses around that number, but when you get down into the details, only about 13 or 14 billion of that's actually going to Ukraine. The rest of it's going to U.S. and to backfill our stockpiles or U.S. operations in European command, curiously enough. So it's a really small one that's going there. But I'll tell you, there's a bigger issue that I worry a lot about, is that by giving Ukraine all of this technology that's in our inventories and teaching them how to defeat it, If we should suddenly get into a fight, now all of a sudden what we're counting on, our stuff's not going to work because they already know how to knock it out of the sky. And I assure you that that is going straight to Beijing, and they're getting the same information on their battlefields. And they are, and I've seen actually videos of it. The Chinese side are definitely taking advantage of all of the lessons being learned on both sides of this line here and applying it to their force. I don't see as aggressive of an action on our side, and I'd sure like to see that change.
Pretty bleak picture you paint today, Daniel Davis, but it's important we pay attention to that. Deep dive, Daniel Davis. Find him online.